Okay, two gaming news things I want to talk about this week. The first involves Ubisoft. Now, if you watch this thing I put out every Wednesday, you know, last week we talked about Assassin's Creed Shadows officially being delayed. We're not really going to rehash that. I think it's good that it's being delayed, but there's new stuff coming out around that delay. And then with that, wider speculation as to what's going on at Ubisoft. There's been a lot of conversation about like how they can right the ship, what's going on, what's going wrong there. So I just kind of wanted to dive into this stuff. So the news around Shadows now, it comes from Insider Gaming, who reports that this delay did not come as a surprise for developers. It was expected and in many ways actually pushed for by the developers themselves. You know, the people in the trenches working on the game, seeing the game the most, are the ones most likely to realize a game needs more time in the oven. So they were apparently pushing for it, but Insider Gaming also suggests that Ubisoft didn't actually pull the trigger on that delay until seeing the quote-unquote softer than expected sales for Star Wars Outlaws. Now, last week with the news of the delay, like some of us kind of put that together, two and two, with that statement coming out, but now, you know, at least from Insider Gaming sources, that's where this is at. Additional context we now have about the delay involves the game, yes, definitely taking the time for polish and bug fixes and stuff like that it sorely needs, but also the fact that they are still working on and tweaking and really trying to get the accuracy of the historical elements of the game. With Insider Gaming noting that historical experts that they usually bring on for these types of Assassin's Creed games were brought on board later than usual in the process this time around, leading to this issue, which to me, is that just a mismanagement thing? Whose error, whose mistake on whose part is that? I don't know. But apparently they've been working to address historical accuracy concerns, cultural concerns, stuff like that. I'm curious to see how much of that stuff is actually going to be changed unless they really hustle and crunch, because the game being delayed from November to February, that's not the biggest delay. You can't change or fundamentally alter massive elements of the game, only little tweaks and stuff. So I'm curious to see, number one, how much of a difference it makes when we see the game again, but also, is that going to do anything? Is that going to be enough? Or are suddenly people going to be like, oh, okay, wait, I want to play this? That I really don't know for sure. It kind of goes back with Star Wars Outlaws. And with Star Wars Outlaws, Ubisoft has publicly said, hey, softer than expected sales, but we're tweaking things like making the checkpoints better and getting rid of some of those instant fail stealth missions and fixing some bugs, meaning maybe that'll help sales go up closer to the holiday season. I don't think like general audiences are looking for patch notes to like really buy. Maybe hardcore gamers, yes, but I don't think general audiences are really like looking for that stuff. I don't think people walking into GameStop and seeing a new Star Wars game are going to go, oh, well, I heard from Ubisoft shareholders that they finally fixed some bugs and some checkpoints. So I don't know. To me, it feels like very last minute choices and decisions that Ubisoft is making lately, like pretty much almost to the field goal line when they're trying to pivot and trying to fix and trying to save things, but it's too little too late. I think to me, a lot of the Ubisoft stuff is just like, it's such a massive, massive company. It's got tons of employees, tons of IP, a bunch of projects in place, and it seems like it's just this giant momentum snowball builder that sometimes it's hard to get the train to stop rolling when there's actually issues because they've been on autopilot for a while. And I don't want to take away like the individual work people have done on these games, but like Far Cry 6, another Far Cry, you know, stuff like that. Ubisoft has their formula, they have their type of games, but it's starting to be revealed that they need to change it up a little bit more. So I'm like, a lot of the conversation this week has been like, Ubisoft like is really in a mess right now, in a rut, you know? A lot of gaming news commentators and stuff like that have already talked about this and like how they've canceled so many projects like Beyond Good and Evil 2 are just still in development and languishing. They're still licking their wounds from Skull and Bones. For years now, I've very much publicly criticized Ubisoft for a variety of different things, but weirdly enough, there is an opportunity here where I think that the ship can be steered in the right direction. I think it's just tough, but like they've already survived, you know, kind of a downward trend in a lot of ways for the last decade. Not to say they haven't had a lot of successes. Of course, the Assassin's Creed games and stuff like that sell like crazy, but some of their other IPs have languished. And I really think that's where they can turn it around, right? Is embracing all those things they have. They sit on a lot of intellectual property that if wrangled right, wrangled properly, can make them a bunch of money. They got unique, special stuff. They've tried to expand this stuff into other media, not always to the greatest success. They made a Watch Dogs movie that's coming out soon, apparently, but like, who knows how that is. They tried an Assassin's Creed movie. There's a way to try to do this better. We're seeing other game publishers and studios embrace and get their intellectual property out there into the mainstream with success, whether it's PlayStation, with Last of Us. Like, I think it's going to become more of a thing, and I think Ubisoft has to get on the right track with that. And again, not only that, but like, keep making games with some of those interesting properties. Splinter Cell, bring back more Tom Clancy stuff. Give us another Rainbow Six. There are, of course, a bunch of Assassin's Creed games in development. There is a lot there. Rayman, I don't know, bring Rayman back for a new age. Who knows if he'll still go over well, but there is stuff there that I think that they can bring out and really try and go for. It's just whether or not they are smart enough to do it. I think at this point, they realize that something has to change. Obviously, we've talked about like the shareholders and stuff and like internal investigations in terms of like fixing what's going on. I think it's going to be a lot of growing pains. I also think they're just so massive that I don't expect them to shut their doors next week. And I think that they're just sitting on too many cool properties to just fizzle away like this. They've tried some new things. They've tried some weird things. They've spent a lot of money, but ultimately, I think they need to go back to what they really were kicking some ass with. The problem is they just need to do it in a way that doesn't feel formulaic. As many of us have gotten tired of Ubisoft games and found many of them predictable, they gotta find a way to bring back some really cool properties, some really cool characters and worlds, but not in exactly the same way. They have to surprise and delight audiences, you know, in new ways. But I am literally the most armchair guy in the world. I don't know what I'm talking. I'm literally just spitballing here, but that's what I think. If you're new, welcome to Two Things. So every Wednesday I put out a video here on this channel where I talk about two news topics I find interesting, something I just want to blab about or dive deeper into. The Game Ranks Friday news show, I kind of touch on a lot of the news. Here, I kind of just drill down on two topics or so. So the other story I did want to talk about this week is Nintendo. I'm laughing already, but like it's rough. Nintendo and how intensely litigious they are. If you haven't seen the headlines yet, Nintendo has cracked down on yet another Nintendo Switch emulator. The open source emulator Ryujin X, if I'm saying that right, is shut down. So Video Games Chronicle is reporting this. I'll link all the sources and stuff in the description down below, but essentially it has been shut down by its lead developer after being contacted by Nintendo. Apparently they were contacted by Nintendo and offered an agreement to stop working on the project, remove the organization, and all related assets that they were in control of. The developers have confirmed this on their Discord and everything, and that's really a wrap. And this is significant because it's another takedown. Yuzu, the Nintendo Switch emulator, during the summer was taken down. It's not surprising, but like the gaming world, the gaming community does not like when this happens, whether it's a Nintendo Switch emulator or some other smaller emulator for like their old games. It happens a lot, and it happens specifically with Nintendo. Like Nintendo has their own team that just focuses on cracking down on this stuff. And obviously a company is going to rigorously fight to protect its shit, its stuff, you know, its intellectual property, whatever, its bag, if you will. But something about the way Nintendo does it just feels especially brutal. They are swift, they are efficient, and every year we hear news stories about them cracking down on stuff like this. But it did make me dive into the world of Nintendo Switch emulators, because I gotta be totally honest, like I am not in that world. I have a Nintendo Switch. I play it occasionally. I haven't emulated like new modern consoles. I'm not that into getting into the technical weeds anymore. I'm kind of like retired from stuff like that. I just like want to no nonsense, just buy my shit and play it. But I did do some research, and I did just like dive around and peek into communities and like why people go for Nintendo Switch emulators. And it's interesting because it's not just, people aren't just emulating Nintendo Switch because then they don't have to buy Nintendo games or buy a Nintendo Switch. Obviously, there's that appeal for a lot of people, but the overwhelming consensus I saw is that people just don't like Nintendo hardware. People want to play Nintendo games. They enjoy Nintendo games. They have fun, but They just despise the hardware. And I think that's interesting because it's pretty obvious. And with these emulators, you can play it on any device you want. You can upscale it. You can presumably have higher frame rates. You can mod it if you want. You can tweak the visuals a little bit if you want. There's so much freedom, right? And I think a lot of this comes from Nintendo keeping their software, their stuff, only on Nintendo Switch. And it's almost like the fact that you'll never see Nintendo games on Steam or something like that sort of creates this problem in a way. Two almost self-created problems. The fact that, they're, and I say, like, I don't think it's changing anytime soon. Like, I don't think Nintendo's putting their stuff on Steam. But, like, the fact that they don't do that, and also the fact that they don't focus on top-of-the-line, cutting-edge hardware. And their devices often, show their age, like the Nintendo Switch right now. So that, to me, seems to be, like, one of the core fundamental reasons why people go for these emulators. Not to mention, I think there has to be some level of accessibility there. Nintendo famously does not offer a lot of accessibility options for their games or their hardware, like people who are disabled or can't play games like traditionally, like some other people would. We've talked about accessibility devices in the past. PlayStation has a controller, Xbox has a controller. Nintendo doesn't do a lot. Their games don't support a lot of options. So I can't imagine that some people can take advantage of more accessibility by running it on a PC. Unfortunately, Nintendo is just going to kill them with lawyers. But I am curious to see how things go, especially if a new Nintendo Switch releases soon. Are people going to hop on emulating that right away? Is the fact that maybe it's going to be graphically a little better going to be good enough for people? I don't really think so. I think people who are into emulating this type of stuff are going to keep doing it. I just thought that was interesting, and I kind of wanted to talk about that because, like, the news, obviously, it's pretty cut and dry. There's not too much to talk about other than, like, they took down another one. Nintendo's gonna Nintendo. But because I didn't know a lot about the world of Nintendo Switch emulation, looking into it is an interesting situation. Unfortunately now, for some people though, they're shit out of luck. Well, those are two things in the news I wanted to talk about this week and dive into, but I do have a bonus thing for you, of course. I did see some comments recently asking about my phone and wanted to know if I would give a little review and stuff like that. I had posted on Instagram, and some people were asking about it. So quick hardware review, because I'm like a bootleg tech reviewer. So I am a Pixel person. I'm an Android person. The Pixel 9 Pro is the new phone I went with. I've been a Pixel enthusiast basically from the beginning, and their hardware has really evolved quite a bit. And for now, I think this is just, we're regressing in phones. I feel like we're running out of things to do with our phones, come up with interesting things. Really, it's just software stuff and AI stuff that I just don't want on my phone. But on the hardware side, there's only so much. So now at the very least, Pixel 9 Pro offers just a normal size and a bigger size. So I'm glad I can get like the smaller size phone that has all the features I'm willing to pay for. But yeah, the thing is with the Pro phone, you get the premium materials, the metals, the edges, and everything like that. This phone is thicker and heavier than like my last couple of phones. So it's interesting. And I've noticed this with iPhone too, with like bigger camera bumps and like nicer materials and all that. Like we were getting to a point where phones were always getting thinner and lighter. I feel like some phones this generation are kind of going the opposite direction, but that's like a weird nitpick for me personally. The phone itself, the camera is absolutely fantastic. That's why I've stuck with Pixel for so long, partially. The software, of course, is also very good, super smooth. The phone is very fast for what I do, and I keep my phones very simple, very basic. Like I said, I kind of retired from doing crazy stuff on my tech devices. It does everything I want, super fast, super good. The battery life has been surprisingly good. Because I opt for the smaller phones, I usually get the shit end of the stick on battery life, but thankfully here, it's been pretty good. I think it's more from software optimizations and stuff like that. I was pretty annoyed that they changed the button to default, like the Google Assistant button. They changed it to default to Gemini, and that was annoying. It took me a minute to find the settings to change that, but I switched it back to my good old Google Assistant lady friend. But like iPhone, Pixel is now in this element where it's kind of predictable, and they're not coming up with big game-changing updates every single year. And essentially, it's less interesting year over year. iPhone, in my opinion, hasn't been interesting for quite a few years, and Pixel now is pretty much at that point. A lot of the interesting things that made Pixel unique, like the back fingerprint sensor, the squeezable sides to activate, your own thing, like activate Google Assistant or something like that. That stuff has gone away. The interesting, quirky, playful color schemes and weirder kind of like almost pared down minimalist IKEA style designs of the phone. All that stuff is gone. And now they're kind of just going for flashy, kind of heavy metal flagship to compete with all the other guys. I say this as an insane person who has tried every single phone, who has had every single phone. I was like the first person to have a Galaxy Note, and everybody was like, why do you have this giant phone, you weirdo? I was one of the first people to buy a foldable phone, and people were like, why do you have a folding phone, you weirdo? I've always been an early adopter. I love following this stuff. I love talking about it, but I never really have an opportunity to. So yeah, not a lot of like crazy thoughts about the Pixel 9 Pro. Other than these things themselves, telephones, cell phones are both incredible miracles, giving us access to so much knowledge, but that knowledge is also rotting our brains slowly. That's probably not a good way to end this video, but hey, I've been on a rant for quite some time now, so let me know what you think in the comments about the stuff we talked about this week. Assassin's Creed, but really Ubisoft. What's going on there? What can they do to fix things? And I mean that. I want to know what you guys think. You're armchair experts and analysts as much as I am, right? I don't really think it's as simple as just like a culture war thing or a just make games less buggy thing. I think they fundamentally need to change a lot. So I want to know what you guys think. And let me know, of course, what you think about Nintendo. If you are a Switch emulator, I'd love to hear from you and why you do it, how you do it, and I will be reporting you to the FBI. No, I'm kidding. But let me know what you think about this stuff. Thanks for hanging out with me, talking about the news. If you like what I'm trying to do here, I'm just trying to be normal and talk about stuff I like. Clicking the like button helps me out. Thank you. But that's all I got for you this week. Have a great one. I'm Jake Baldino. Subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me.